at Swiss Lenana Hotel, and today's conversation is about renewable energy. Because on the 20th of September of this month, we have the 100% Renewable Energy March, right? That you're all a part of. And from different organizations are coming together to sort of remind the government of their commitment to being 100% renewable energy by 2020. So I actually want to go back a little, and I'm curious to know at which point all of you got, passionate and really invested in renewable energy and trying to not just educate yourselves, but sort of change the policies and help educate others about the importance of renewable energies versus fossil fuels. Maybe you could start with you, Miriam. How did that come about for you?
So we saw a lot on the news that students all over Europe and some in the US were striking against climate change to raise awareness about this issue. And we realized that Kenya is being affected a lot, for example, the forest fires that happened in Mount Kenya and the droughts in the north. But we realized that here nothing was being done to raise awareness about this issue. So therefore we wanted to take action as well.
And do something and involve the youth. When was that? When did you start Youth for
Climate? We started in March, I think begin March.
Oh, March this year?
Yeah.
Which was right around the time the fires were, and for some reason it was shocking that there was not much coverage on that thousands of acres were being burnt down. Did you find that it was a conversation that was easy to have amongst your friends? And were they like, climate change? We want to talk about, Kendrick Lamar's latest album. Who cares about climate change?
Well, it was quite easy actually, because I think all of them realized that this is an important issue, especially as we're the youth and this is going to affect our future. So most people were very interested as well, and were very supportive of when we started Youth for Climate.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And what about you? When did you first get involved in this?
Wow, this
movement?
For me was 2016. Okay. I joined the Society for International Development, and one of my colleagues came in and said, we need to start looking into energy issues, especially from an environmental perspective. And when we were looking back at the Society for International Development, what is our expertise? What would be a more creative way to get into the conversation? We decided, because we've been experts on scenarios and futures, we would approach the energy question in Eastern Africa from a futures perspective. So we embarked on research on what is the current state and feel of the energy sector in the region. So that's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, which is what we called the picture of now, just getting to understand what the current situation is. And then we developed imaginary future stories of what the possible futures of the different energy sources within Eastern Africa would be. So our future stories go from 2016 to 2050. And just to briefly summarize the stories, so one of the stories is called Mitumba, which is basically highlighting the second-hand nature of these big, dirty fossil fuels that are being exported from other countries to our countries. So we use the Mitumba because of the analogy of second-hand clothes that come from Europe, and we consume them here at a very cheap price. And that is the same thing we were trying to allude with the Mitumba story. And then we have the market story, which basically talks about the future of energy being driven by markets. So we have all these stories about carbon pricing, shift to renewable energy, land that is being cleared and set aside for carbon sequestration. So the second story is about markets deciding what future we have. And then the third story is more of now what we have here. It's a story about an uprising of a new form of leadership that wants a green transformation in the energy sector, but in all sectors, that then includes everybody within the community, everybody in the country, to begin making plans and ideas and development that develop their own communities. So we see the emergence of leaders from the community level setting up their own solar systems, setting up their own wind farms, fighting for their own forests, the whole climate movements that now we're having.
Right.
So those are the three stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Omar, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so for me, I'll have to go to 2014. So for a long time, one of my parents comes from Lamu and the other one comes from Kitui. And these are actually the areas that we're planning to do coal plant and a coal mine, so to speak. So after finishing, my background is law, after finishing and going back to Lamu to give back to the community and at least to find a way of working with them, because for a very long time it's been a marginalized community. They don't have, at least now they're trying, but they've not had even 1 kilometer of tarmac road since independence until at least the last time I checked, which was last year. So I realized it's important to go back, give back to the community and work around this thing. And that was the time that now I started hearing about the stories of having a coal plant to generate electricity. Being the first coal plant in East Africa and Central Africa at the time, the understanding on coal was very minimal. And the proponents, when they come to talk to you about the issues, they normally finding ways of not telling you really how bad the situation is. So they tell you how they're going to develop employment, how they're going to develop cheap electricity, among other things. So we really had to do a lot of research and consult with a lot of people. So we even organized to go to South Africa and an area called Mpumalanga just to see how communities are benefiting, so to speak, from these plants. And we realized these plants are taken to communities that are marginalized. The electricity doesn't go to them; it goes to the urban areas, to the main grid, and it's used in the urban centers. Also, they don't get the jobs because they are not. Most of the time, they have not gone to school. And being the first coal plant, then they don't have the experience. So we'll have people coming from outside Kenya doing these jobs. And also, these are people who are depending a lot on their natural resources to get their livelihoods. So if you're going to have a plant that's going to employ about 200 or 400 people for a period of 25 years, while impacting almost 75% of the population because they depend on natural resources, then that's a no-brainer even to start speaking on. So I really saw the importance of speaking about these issues and highlighting, and at least now I can say I'm happy that we've been able to even organize and we're having a national campaign around the issues because it's easy for someone in Nairobi to say this is the problem of the people of Lamu or Kitui, but when you understand that these are going to have consequences even to you, you're the one that is going to pay for this electricity. When it's going to be expensive, it's not even needed according to our government plans. So definitely it's us as taxpayers, as electricity users, that are going to be paying for the electricity. So
it
I
felt
think,
like a non-brainer.
Yeah, I had to get in. It's more of a matter of survival, more than it's more of passion and survival, because it's my community that are going to be affected. It's me as a Kenyan that's going to be paid for the electricity, while a few corporates and people maybe within government that are going to make a killing.
The money.
Well, for them, it's easy for them. If you're having effects, they'll make sure their families are not there. I'm the one who knows my families are in these areas. They're also sure that they have access to, all these kinds of health and other facilities. They can take their families out to London and other places to get treatment. But for us, even someone going to the public hospitals, it's really a hassle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Brian, last but not least, how did you get involved?
Sharon, thank you. Actually, just to begin with, about my organization, it was formed in 2006. That is when we had COP12, Conference of Parties, and the parties here we mean countries. It was held here in Nairobi. That is 2006, and then we also had it's called Conference of Youths. It's called COE in short. Yeah, it was COE 2, which was also held up in Nairobi. Here, many youths came together. They wanted to be now on the table for negotiations in matters to do with youths. So they found a leeway of coming together for their voices to be heard. Youths, as you all know, we've always been put in a situation where if we have to be heard, we have to go on the roads and then make some noise is when we be heard. So back to me, I came to be part of this organization when I was still in campus, and we were looking for somewhere. By then I did environmental science as a course, and I'm an environmentalist. So I came to know about this area because I wanted somewhere where I can express my feeling in terms of making a change about climate. Yeah, so I became part of this movement. Yeah, it's an umbrella which is African. It is in about 45 countries, and we have about 20,000 members in Africa.
Oh, wow.
So we are going, we're moving.
Okay.
So,
all right. Okay. So now I'm curious to know my question, which I sort of preempted at the, in the segment before. We've talked a lot about renewable energies and, solar, wind. What happens when there's no sun? And especially, in Kenya, we're blessed to be on the equator, so there's sun. Even when it's cold and raining, the sun's going to pop out at some point. But what happens when you have long stretches where there's not much sun and you're relying on wind, which you don't know when that's going to come full force? What happens then? How does a country keep the lights on?
I think it's important to know that there are different sources of renewable energy. One, well, the sun doesn't shine all the time. For sure, the wind might be blowing when the sun is not shining, because most of the time the sun shines during the day. The wind is normally stronger during the night. Geothermal is also part of the renewable energy, and actually it makes the most of our energy source here in Kenya. It's the biggest contributor to the energy source or the electricity that we're utilizing from Kenya. So I think what's important for people to understand is if you're looking at all these different options, for solar, while it doesn't shine all the time, sometimes you're getting more electricity than you need at that particular point. And we are at a point where we've made a lot of development technological-wise. You're seeing now countries and companies are coming up with ways of storing that electricity. The way that you can charge your mobile phone and use it when you're out during the day and charge it late at night for tomorrow, that's the same way that if you are generating excess electricity, you can store that electricity and you utilize it when you're not using it. Countries have already done it. It's not hypothetical. Elon Musk did it in Australia, whereby he told them in a period of 100 days he will manufacture capacity to store about 100 megawatts of electricity. If he doesn't, then that facility will be for free and he won't be paid. And he did it in 100 days. That's like 3 months and 5 or so days, and he was able to do that. So, and even here in Kenya, I've seen now we're having plans to have the first wind/solar plant that we are going to incorporate parts of storage as well. So it's something that is working. People have tried it, and I don't see why we should really be burning fossil fuels when we can actually be utilizing these energy sources.